This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Neifeld with Agency One, and we are continuing our Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon WebEx calls. And today it is Monday, April 13th, and the subject of this call is COVID scams, hackers, and remote work, keeping your employees and systems safe, part 2. This is a continuation of the WebEx that we hosted last Monday, featuring Scott Richards, Director of Training from Design Data. And he's going to continue this session talking about password security, password problems, multi-factor authentication, and again, how to stay safe. So I hope everyone had a nice Easter, that everyone is staying safe and healthy. And I am going to turn it over to Scott. Scott, please take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathy. Can you just verify that you can hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thanks so much. All right, well, hello everyone, and again, I will echo Kathy's sentiments. I hope everyone is home, wherever you might be at the moment, staying safe and healthy. And I really hate to do a webinar on something kind of frightening, but in these times, but the good news is hopefully you'll learn some things that will help to keep you more safe, and that will be a good thing. So we're going to dive into topics today, as Kathy mentioned, around specifically password security and how to keep yourself safe. There's so many different things that you can do right now around so many different topics, but the email security that we covered last time is certainly one of the probably top two, and this is the other. We're going to talk about areas such as multi-factor authentication and password management and things like that. So I started with I literally just about 2 hours ago went out and just looked up some of the things over the last couple of weeks that have been in the news regarding data breaches and all kinds of things. And it's really kind of sad that it was so easy for me to find these in about less than 2 minutes. I was able to pull up. These are just 4 examples of accounts, and these are mostly small businesses, except for perhaps GoDaddy, that were hacked or infected or data breached, or just something bad happened to them over the last couple of weeks. And there's hundreds and thousands of these examples that you could pull up, in the course of, a month. So it's just to illustrate that there's lots of stuff that's going on out there that you probably never even hear about. I'm guessing that you probably never heard of most of these companies. Some of them are in the US, some of them are not in the US, but this stuff is happening all over the world, certainly in the US. And a lot of the stuff that you see about these data breaches has to do with bad password hygiene. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. So a report that came out last year from Verizon mentioned that over 80% of all of the breaches that you've heard about over the news in the last year or so had to do with stolen or weak passwords. And I know you've heard a lot about this last year. For example, Facebook was been in the news constantly for lack of security. Adobe was breached last year. There have been just so many different companies, large companies, small companies, that have been breached. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term breach, it just means that they were hacked and something of value was stolen from the company. And it's usually information regarding your accounts. So it could be your username, your password, your address, hopefully not, but possibly your social security number, any kind of information that gets stolen from these data breaches. And when these kind of things happen, for example, this was a huge one at Capital One last July. A lot of us remember that, especially if you were a Capital One customer. This particular case, there was a young woman who was trying to see if she could get into Capital One. And luckily for us, she just did this for fun and proved that she could hack into Capital One. And then I think she actually turned herself in. But most of the time, that's not what happens. Most of the time, these people go out, they steal this information, such as your Capital One credit card information, which could be obviously potentially devastating. And what they do is whoops, let me go back. They sell it, and they sell it on the dark web. So you go out and these people will steal your information, and they have kind of a version of eBay, except it's for hackers. And people will literally wake up in the morning and they go out to the dark web, which is this really bad portion of the internet where all the criminals hang out, and they sign up for these auctions, and they will sell these 100 million credit card applications, which would include your password, any other information that was stolen from this data breach. And people will buy them, and they just then go ahead and use them to try to hack into your other accounts. So that's why it's so important that we try to be very careful with our password security, because if not, then this information gets thrown out onto the dark web and sold in these auctions. So when we talk about password security, one of the first things we have to talk about is how long a password needs to be in order to make it much harder to be hacked. And there is a physical number here. This is not kind of a best practice as far as a guess or an estimate. There is an actual number at which your password almost becomes unhackable. So I believe we have a chat function as part of this session. So if you want to go ahead and post in the chat, what you think the answer to this is, and I'll go ahead and take a quick look and see how we're doing. So I'll give you about 10 seconds or so to go ahead and do that. All right, so I see 12, I see 8, I see 15, I see 12, I see 13, I see 8. Okay, so quite a variety, another 12. So 12 seems to be another 15, kind of looks like the most popular answer here. And that's very consistent with what I normally would see with this particular question. So the answer is actually 15 is the answer. For many years, people used to say you need to have an 8-character password. Then you definitely heard 12 characters, but in reality, the answer is 15 characters. And the reason I'm not going to go into the very fine, minutia of the technical reasons behind this, but there is a computer-based reason, and it has to do with the way the computer passwords are stored. When you get beyond 14 characters on the computer, the computer is no longer able to store that password securely in the format that it's been using. And the kind of anomaly is that when it's storing these passwords up to 15 characters, it's encrypting them, but they're still able to be decrypted if someone were to steal them. Once it gets past 14 characters, it has to resort to using a whole different storage mechanism, which is much harder and in fact virtually unhackable. So there is a very large difference between using a 14-character password and using a 15-character password. So if you have any passwords below 15 characters, you really should look at changing them to at least 15 characters. And I can hear the groans right now, and I totally understand that, right? I mean, it's really hard to come up with a 15-character password. So just kind of hold that thought for a minute, because I'm about to give you some even worse news. And it's another poll. How many passwords do I need to be safe? I ask this question a lot. I get a lot of different answers to this, but if I were to ask you what the number is of passwords at which you are considered to be safe, again, go ahead and post in the chat what you think that number would be. I see 1, and hopefully that person is joking, but we'll see. Okay, I see 5, 4, as many as you have accounts. I saw 15. I see 1 for each site. All right, so a lot of different answers, ranging from 1 to 4 to 5 to 15 to unlimited to 1 for every site. And luckily, I did see the right answer in there. And it is the one that's the person who said you have to have a different password for every account, or 1 for every site. So again, bad news. But why? Why is this the case? I mean, why do you need to have a different password for every account? Okay, and here's the answer. I already alluded to it earlier, but take a look at some of these statistics here. So this on the first one, there's one file that was located on the dark web that had 1.4 billion passwords on it. And as I mentioned, these are then sold through an eBay-like system on the dark web. Someone now buys that file and they have 1.4 billion passwords. What do you think they do with that? Well, what they do is they look at all of the passwords. And by the way, the passwords come with the usernames that are associated with them. They are then able to figure out what your username is, and then they go and look at all of your other accounts. So if you have the same password for more than one account, they're going to be able to hack into that. So when Capital One was breached, okay, people stole, well, I mean, that the woman who got into it stole all of those passwords, right? Now, luckily, she was not in it for bad things other than to prove she could, but that's very unusual. Normally, as I said, someone would steal that information, then they would have your password for Capital One. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to go to all of your other accounts and they're going to try to hack into it with that password. So if you were reusing that password anywhere else, they're now going to be able to get into your other account. And God forbid you had your Morgan Stanley account set up with that same password, or your other bank accounts, or your mutual fund accounts, or any financial account of any kind, or just any important site that had information that you don't want to be leaked out. Okay, because now they've got your password. So this is why you have to have a separate password for every account. Okay, and now you can groan some more, because now you're saying, okay, well, wait a minute. How the heck am I supposed to have a 15-character password for every single account, and I have to have a different 15-character password for every account, right? That's humanly impossible to do. And I would say to you, you are absolutely right. It is humanly impossible to do, which is why I'm going to show you a way to do it that is not humanly possible, but it is digitally possible. But the other problem is, when I ask people, how many accounts do you think you have? Most people say, well, I think I probably have between 15 and 20. But statistics show that the average number of accounts or logins that people have is more like 50 to 100. And if you don't think you have that many, do what I did. And when you're bored one day, just sit down and start listing the different number of websites or logins or services that you ever have to go to, either on your phone, on your tablet, or on the web. And I bet you'd be really surprised, because I did this about 3 weeks ago, and I personally have 137 logins. I was pretty shocked. I mean, I thought I had about 70 or 80, but when I went down and listed them all, I realized that I had 137, and I'm going to show you kind of how the breakdown of those 137 work. But now I'm saying, okay, so now I need 137 different 15-character passwords. Again, how is that possible? The good news is it is possible. Again, it's not humanly possible to remember that, but the answer is using something called a password manager. And I suspect some of you already are doing this, so bravo if you are. If you're not, I'm going to show you how this works and why I strongly, strongly recommend that every single person on this call get a password manager as soon as possible. So what does this do? Well, first thing it does 3 really important things. The first thing it does is it will generate for you a unique 15-character or more password for every one of your logins. So that removes the issue of trying to come up with these 15-character logins, okay? But that's only one part of the problem. That's probably the least difficult part of this problem, right, is coming up with these logins. The biggest problem is remembering them, right? So the good news is you don't have to remember them, because it stores them in a vault, a digital vault, And I liken this to literally the digital equivalent of a safety deposit box. That's what this is. So if you think about if you have a safety deposit box either in a bank or like a lockbox in your house, or even just like a file folder that has a physical lock on it that you store important papers like your estate documents or your will or your mortgage documents. Okay, that's all this is. It's the digital version of that. You have a password that you use to kind of encrypt this information. And then once you put the password in, you have access to all of those documents, except they're not pieces of paper, they're passwords, right? And so it works exactly the same way. So all of those 15 character passwords are stored in that vault. So if I were to ask you, what is, page 5 of your will say, you probably have no idea, because if you ever really needed to look at it, you just unlock your safety deposit box with your key and you pull out the will and you look at it. And this works the same way. If you were to ask me, what's your Amazon password? I have no idea what my Amazon password is, but the good news is I don't need to know what it is because it's sitting in this vault. Okay, so the two things that Password Manager does for you is it will create the really kind of complex, unique password, and it stores it in the vault. So that's really good. But the third thing for me is even better. And I see the question, Robin. Thank you. I should have mentioned, please do post questions in the chat. I will get to them. I'm going to leave time at the end for some questions. So please go ahead if you have them. And hopefully I'll cover some of them as I'm going along here. So here's the third thing, and to me, which is my favorite feature, is when you go to for me, if I go to any of those 137 websites or apps on my phone, it will automatically fill in the user and the password for me. So I don't have to even go to the vault, find the user and the password, copy and paste it into the website, because when I go to and I'm going to show you this live in about 5 minutes, so you'll see it actually work. But when I go to that website, it's going to go ahead and fill that in for me. So the bottom line is you don't have to create any passwords. It will do it for you. You don't have to remember any passwords because it will fill them in for you. So consequently, I have 137 passwords, well, 138, because I need one to get into the Password Manager. And of those 138, how many do I know? One. That's it. I know the one password to get me in, just like if you had your lockbox. The only thing you need is that combination to get into the lockbox, right? Once you're in, then you have access to everything right there. So it's really cool, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. So usually when I say this, people say, well, I go use Google Chrome to save my password. Isn't that really the same thing? And the answer is no, it's not. In theory, you might think it is because it is saving your passwords. The difference is where it's saving it. Google Chrome is saving your passwords in Google, okay? The Password Manager is saving your password in a password manager. The difference is that Google is not a security company. Security to Google, although they will tell you it's important, is not their #1 goal, right? Their goal is to make money through a lot of different mechanisms and products. The password security company is in business to make money through making sure that your passwords are secure. That's all they do. So that usually leads to this question. Well, what happens if the Password Manager company gets hacked? Which is a really good question. And in fact, the Password Manager that I use, which is called LastPass, was hacked twice last year. So usually then people say, you see, I told you. And what I tell them is, okay, so they were hacked twice, but the crooks were able to get into the company. They were not able to get any passwords out of the vault either time that they tried to hack it. So it's kind of like they got into the screen door, but they couldn't get in the front door. And so the result was that between both of the hacks, 0 passwords were stolen from LastPass. So this is why I tell people, if you have saved passwords in Google Chrome or any other browser, ironically, what you should do is go to Google and type in how to remove passwords from Chrome. And you'll see tons of articles on how to delete your saved passwords on every browser. because you should not be doing that, okay? The next piece I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to jump and show you both of these in action, is two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication, a lot of you probably are using it today, but you may not know that's what it's called. And the example I normally give here is your bank. If you have an ATM card, you're using two-factor authentication, because all two-factor authentication means is you're using two different pieces of information to authenticate who you are. If someone steals your ATM card, they can't normally get money out of your account, because when they put that ATM card in the ATM, it says, okay, type in your PIN. And they don't have your PIN unless you've written it on your ATM card, which I hope nobody has done. And if you do that, please don't do that, because then you're kind of giving them that other piece of information, right? So that's great. But if you don't use an ATM card and you do online banking, up until the last few years, banks would just ask you for your password, and once you typed in your password, you were in, which means that if someone were to hack your password, now they can get into your account. Well, now luckily we have two-factor authentication for digital as well, and this requires a PIN, just like you need for an ATM. And the way it works is when you set up your account, your bank account or any other account, you can do this for Facebook, you can do this for Instagram, you can do this for Amazon. You need a PIN in addition to your password. And normally you've probably done this with your bank account lately. If you log in from a browser it doesn't recognize, it will ask you, it'll send you a text and say, please, I'm going to send you a text, please type this 6-digit code in so we recognize you, which is great. The banks are starting to do that, okay? But a lot of other types of accounts, like perhaps mutual fund accounts or brokerages or even Amazon, doesn't do that. And I'll show you how to set it up in Amazon. But there's two ways you can set it up. One way, as I said, is through a text, and that's the least or the less secure way to do it, because a hacker could hack into your text message and retrieve that text. But sometimes you don't have a choice, so it's still better to do the text than to do nothing. The better approach is to use an app, and the apps are called authenticator apps, and there's tons of them out there. They're free. You download them from the App Store, the Play Store, Google Play Store, and you just Google best authenticator apps. And what these apps do is they literally just sit on your phone all day generating random numbers. That's it. And every 20 or 30 seconds, the number will change. So I'm going to show you now how you use both two-factor authentication and password management together. So to do this, I'm going to go to Amazon as an example, and I'm going to log into my Amazon account. So I'm going to go over here and say sign in. And when I click sign in, what's going to happen is you saw pretty quickly my user ID got popped into the email field. Well, I didn't type that. That came right from my password manager. And so all I do is I say continue. And again, within a split second, the password just got populated in my Amazon account. I didn't type that in. In fact, I don't even know what my Amazon password is. So if I had to type it in, I'd be out of luck. I'd have to change my password, click on forgot your password. This came right from the password manager. The password manager is sitting up here in my browser as a browser plugin. If I click on it, you can kind of see what it looks like. And I can, if I wanted to, I'll show you what the vault looks like, because I can open the vault, although I really never have to do this since it's going to always fill it into the website for me. But if you wanted to see your passwords, they're all kind of sitting here. You can see that you can group them by category. So for example, I have 12 for entertainment, I've got 12 for financial, I've got 17 passwords for home. And if you're curious what these are, so I'll just give you an idea. I have Adobe Lightroom, I had blinds.com when I bought new blinds, I rented a camera lens. So you'd be surprised that, how many different ones. I got my online water delivery. There's a lot of things you don't think you have logins for, and you do. And if you have a logon for it, you better have a different password than anything else you're using, for the same reason we talked about earlier. Okay, so this is your where the passwords are stored. But again, I don't really have to go in here because they're always going to be, automatically put into the password, the website for me. So now I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Now, here's where two-factor authentication comes in handy. And you might say, well, why would you set that up for Amazon, right? It's not a financial account. Well, the reason that I set it up for Amazon is because I store my credit card in Amazon. You know, is that a best practice? Well, probably not, right? I probably would tell most people, yeah, don't store your credit card in Amazon. But because I have a password manager that's being used, and I know that my passwords are 15 characters, and I have two-factor authentication set up, I'm 100% confident that this account can never be broken into. Because if someone were to breach Amazon, just like they breached all those other sites, and by the way, you probably heard about the Marriott breach last week. Marriott got breached, and I think 50, some ridiculous number of Marriott accounts were breached, and so all that information was stolen. Okay, I hope none of you are Marriott users. You probably heard about it, but if you are, okay, your Marriott password, okay, could have been stolen, and then basically they would have found your other accounts as well. So here's where two-factor authentication will save you. I say sign in, and if a hacker were to have stolen this information, my password for Amazon, when you click sign in, when they click sign in, it's going to say, okay, what is your two-step verification PIN? And they're going to say, what? The only way they could possibly have that is if they literally have your mobile phone as well. So they would have had to breach that account and steal your mobile phone, and the odds of that are infinitesimal. Because at this point, all you do, and I know you can't physically see me, but what I am doing is in my right hand, I have my mobile phone, and I have this authenticator app that's literally just running. And this on my phone, it says Amazon, and there's a 6-digit number next to it, which just changed because it changes every 20 seconds. And it says 278-484. So I type 278-484, I hit enter, and now I'm into Amazon. Okay, and that's all you have to do to not have to ever worry about any of these accounts. And so I recommend you set this up for bank accounts, for any financial account, or anything with your credit card. Okay, so that's how two-factor authentication works. That's how password management works. By the way, the password manager also works on your phone. So what you probably want to do is go to Google and type in best password manager, and it will list for you a bunch of the best ones here. The one I'm using is LastPass. Okay, these come with free versions, they come with paid versions. Okay, the one that I'm using right now is the free version, but if you have a family, you may want to go for the paid version. It's incredibly cheap. It's like $4 a month to have your whole family on it. And also the authenticator apps are also free. So again, just Google best authenticator app. The one I use is Google Authenticator, but there's lots of other ones. Microsoft has its own, LastPass has its own. They're all free. You just download them and they generate these random numbers. All right, so I know that I'm right at the bottom of the hour. I do want to take a look real quickly at some of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the chat so I can take a look at these. All right, so let me go ahead and jump to the top of the chat here, and I'll try to quickly get to as many of these questions as I can. All right, so first question, how do you make the change to all the existing login passwords? Okay, so that's a great question because the first time you use your password manager, obviously there's nothing in it. You do have to, for the very first time, put all your passwords in it. And while you're doing that, you do want to change all your passwords to 15 characters. So here's how you do that. So for example, I'm going to go to a new tab here, and I'm going to go to my password list, and where am I on my bookmarks here? I'm going to search my bookmarks, and you do kind of have to go through each one of your accounts the first time. So for example, here's my Barracuda account. This is my spam filter. Okay, notice that I literally just went to the website and it just filled in my password. That's because it's in the password manager. But the first time your password manager will be empty, you're going to have to manually put in your information. So I'm going to say next. Don't save, because I don't want to save it in here. And then you'd put in your password and you're going to log in. Now, you will have to change your password the very first time. So what you're going to have to do is go into your account settings, okay? and go to change password. When you go to change password, you'll have to type in your current password. Obviously mine's in the password manager, so I can just click here and say Phil. But here's the trick. When you create your new password, instead of, remember I told you, it will generate it for you. So what you have to do, and this is really cool, you put your cursor in the new password field, you go up to the password manager little icon here, and then you click on generate secure password. Okay, and it's going to bring up a little window here. Whoops, let me bring it up again. And it's going to see, I was playing with it earlier, so you can see that my password length is currently 67 characters. However, frankly, it doesn't matter. You can create a 67 character password because frankly, you're never gonna have to memorize it, okay? And it's gonna be really secure. But if you don't wanna do that, just make sure it's at least 15, okay? And you can change it with this slider here. But I'm gonna, for kicks, I'll just make it 32 because it doesn't matter. You can see what it's gonna be, okay? It doesn't matter because you don't have to memorize it. I usually select all of these so make sure it has uppercase, lowercase. Sorry, I keep moving this go to meeting window and it keeps closing my password window. And then when you're done, you're gonna say fill password, and notice what happens when I click fill password, it then filled the new password and the confirm new password over here with the new one that's 32 characters. And it says, do you want me to update this in the password manager? And you say update. And now that new password, which is now 32 characters, is in your password manager and you never have to touch it ever again. And unless the website makes you change your password, I'm gonna say not now because I'm not really gonna change it. You literally never have to change it ever again, okay? Because once it's in the password manager and it's over 15 characters, it's basically unhackable. So unless the website makes you change your password every 30 days or 90 days or whatever, you don't have to change your passwords again, okay? So that's how you change it the first time for all of your login passwords. Okay, what stops a hacker from getting into your password manager, giving you access again? Yeah, so I kind of just mentioned the answer to that. The only way a hacker can get into your password manager is if they get your password to the password manager. So here's what happens when you log in the morning. When you log in the morning, you're going to see a window that looks like this. You're going to see a black icon at the top, and it's going to ask you to log in. And this is where you put in your master password. This is the password that gets you into your safety deposit box, right? So that's the only password you have to know. Okay, and I type it in and I say log in. And then because I have my LastPass set up with two-factor authentication as well, it's now going to ask me for my passcode. So again, I only have to do this once a day. I'm now looking back at my phone and it says LastPass 594485, 594485. Okay. And the reason I do that, again, is because if someone were to steal my LastPass master password, they still can't get into my password manager because they don't have my phone, which has that 6-digit code on it. Okay, so you want to make sure you've set up two-factor authentication for the password manager also. And the way to do that, if you don't know, the simplest way to do that is go to Google and you type the following: set up 2FA, which stands for two-factor authentication, for, and then whatever account you want to set it up for. And you can see what just pops up here, all the different things you can set it up for. And I'll just say for LastPass, okay? And it will walk you through how to do it. You can also set it up for, you saw Bank of America here. Okay, if you want to set it up for your bank, just go there and it will walk you through how to turn it on for Bank of America, and it gives you instructions. Okay, here's another article on how to enable it. Okay, so you can set it up for any account. It will walk you through it just from there. Okay, how does the password manager work across devices? So the password manager will, when you download it, it's going to have you download a browser plugin, which works on any browser. So Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Internet Explorer, and it just sits up here. but it will also ask you to download an app on your phone or mobile device, and they are connected. So if I go to my phone and I bring up LastPass on my phone and I change a password here in LastPass on my phone and I hit save, about 2 seconds later, I can come into my browser right here and go look at it, and it's going to show that latest update because they talk to each other. They're synced together. So all of the different devices that you have are synced, and the password manager will work across all of the different devices. Let's see. To change your mobile phone number. What if you're using apps on your phone with logins and passwords that have been saved? Robin, that's a good question. It depends on the type of phone you have. If you're using an iPhone and you're saving your passwords on your iPhone using the built-in, I forget what it's called, KeePass or something like that, then you are probably fairly safe using that. So if you didn't want to use Password Manager on your iPhone, you could probably get away with it, except that you're then not going to be synchronized to your Password Manager on your browser. So I still recommend that you do that instead of using the kind of built-in thing on the iPhone. However, if you're on an Android, you definitely do not want to use anything that's built into the Android, because the Android security is very poor in comparison to an iPhone. iPhone security is top-notch, top of the line. I would trust almost anything on an iPhone from a security perspective. Android has been shown to have had lots and lots of security problems. So if you have an Android, you definitely don't want to store anything on the Android password saver there. Let's see, there are some sites in login that require the answer to my first pet's name of the street I grew up on. How does that work? That's a great question, John. And I actually talk about this. I have another module I do on browser security and things like that. And obviously I don't have time to go into it in detail, but just suffice it to say that the hackers will use the answer to your security questions like this as well. So rule of thumb is you do not want to ever use a password that is a pet's name or street you grew up on, or anything that can be found on the internet is the rule of thumb, should never be used as a password. If you use a password manager, this is all moot because you will never have to worry about that again, which is another reason I suggest using a password manager. You'll never have to come up with that. But when you are picking your security questions, this is a different topic, but also important, you still don't want to pick the most easily found answers to those security questions. Because if you pick as a question, oh, I'm going to choose my pet's name as my security question, I can guarantee you that your pet's name is all over the internet. You've probably typed it in Facebook, you've probably typed it in, Twitter, you probably used it as perhaps a password somewhere, down the line. Okay, you want to pick the most difficult questions to answer that you will still remember. And if you literally want to be really, really safe, what I've seen some people do is they pick a really obscure, or they make up the answer. So it'll say, like street that you grew up on, they will put a phony answer in as the answer to their security question. And then they take that answer and they put it in their password manager. So that every time that they have to answer that security question, they just go to their password manager, search for that, question, like last street address, and it will pop up their phony answer. So just be very careful with security questions, because that is another avenue that hackers use to get into your accounts. I have another great question from Kathleen. I have seen websites that require 8 characters in the passwords, no more, no less. How do you deal with that? Well, Kathleen, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck there. There definitely are websites that require 8 characters in a password, which is very insecure, but there's absolutely nothing you can do about that, unfortunately, because the website is controlling the length of that password. We're hoping that as the companies start maturing in their knowledge of security best practices, you'll stop seeing that. But there definitely are still today websites that are forcing you to have 8-character passwords, and unfortunately, there's nothing you can do there. So I got a question about, can you help me to do this? I'm not sure if that has to do with password management or whatever specifically, but to the person who sent me that in private, feel free to email me, and I'll open this up to all of you because I really have no problem with you guys email me directly. My email address is srichards with an S @designdata.com. I'm pretty passionate about this topic because it's so important, especially right now with the coronavirus going on. Hackers, the number I saw yesterday was that the number of hacking attempts was up 665% in the last 3 weeks. They are literally out in force trying to get people and take advantage of people because we're vulnerable right now. So if any of you have any questions about this, or you just want to get clarification, I have no problem with you reaching out to me. So Kathy or Lisa, I know I'm way over time here. I know there's a few other questions, but what I can do is try to answer them and send them to you, and then perhaps you can get them to the other folks.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Okay, so it looks like we're at time, and everybody's asked. You've answered all the questions that everyone has asked. So we'll say thank you very much, and remember, we've got another webinar this coming Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Be watching for the reminder email that we'll be sending out. Thanks a lot, everyone.